Welcome to the Bald Eagle 242 YouTube channel. Today I have a 1992 John Deere GT262. This is the first year for the GT262 mower. This mower is very similar to the GT275, which is basically the exact same tractor except the 275 is a hydrostatic transmission. This one is a 6-speed gear drive transmission. Hopefully you enjoy the video. If you do, leave me some comments down below. If there's a certain part of this video that you want to come back to or you want to look down below, I'll put some links down in the comments with some timestamps so you can just click right on that timestamp and go right to the part you want to. And let's get started on this thing. I'm excited about it. The deck's a little rusted out on it. I don't know how long it's been sitting here, but the guy says it does run, does start. We're gonna try to fire it up here and see what we got. I think these gotta be in neutral to get them to do anything. Yep, you ain't gonna start with that battery. Good thing I stuck the jump pack in my back pocket. This guy did tell me this would start right up. I don't think that's gonna happen with this battery. I'll go ahead and pull this deck off of this thing. I have actually cut my grass with this thing twice, but as you can see, this deck, it's had somebody kind of, I think that's Bondo right there. You can see where something's shot through it. Go ahead and get it off of here. Hopefully it's repairable because these are not cheap decks. All you do is pull these pins in the back. I think this one's been off for a while and these pins are frozen. Got the other side out. There we go. I'll even take a smashed finger for that. All right, usually that's a 5-minute job. You just take them 2 pins out, then pull that bracket off in the front, pull your belt off, make sure this is out, loosens your belt up, and you just slide that right out of there. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and pull all the belts off of this thing and just kind of see what we got here. And if you don't know how this belt goes back on, make sure you take a picture of it or something before you pull it off. Kind of a weird way it routes around here. And it'll go a couple ways, but it'll only work one way. Alright, after looking a little closer at this mower deck, I've decided to take a little bit of a detour here. The holes, I think they can be repaired, but I think the time and effort it's going to take, I'm going to hold off on doing that. I have actually found a good deck semi-locally. It's about an hour and 15 minutes from where I'm at, but I'm actually going to go pick it up now and go ahead and just replace this deck. And then I'm going to save this one. I'll obviously use whatever spindles or blades are best out of the 2 decks. On my way now to pick one up that I found on Marketplace for $100. I think I would easily spend more than $100 a time trying to fix this one. So All right, just made it back. I want to show you something on this deck. It's obviously been sitting, it has a lot of surface rust, but the deck itself is actually in really good shape. I don't see any holes through it, but what I really want to show you here, I have never seen a set of blades kept on a mower and wore to this point. That is the cutting edge. I mean, the entire corners, that's what they were cutting grass with the last time they used this deck. And this one does have the brace in the corner there too, where this one does not. That's where it's rusted out. I don't see where this one ever had a brace in the corner. So maybe it was a design change. I also noticed this one just has one strip across this front edge, where this one here actually has a strip with a cutout there to kind of contour the blade. And it has a second one down there. Now I do see holes in this one where that guard probably was there at one point, but it's obviously gone now. So I think for $100, I couldn't go wrong with this. I'll put new bearings in it. Went ahead and bought bearings and ordered them on Amazon. I'll put some links down below to those. What I'll do is just take a wire wheel and clean up all these rusty spots, and we'll get this thing painted. Go ahead and mask these stickers off. All right, first thing I'm gonna do here after I got this all ground down with a wire wheel and a wire brush is take some prep all and get any dirt or grime off of it. It is a good idea to take this stuff before you start sanding or grinding too, and just clean it off a little bit. But it's just a grease and wax remover, and it just gives the paint a better chance to stick to everything. Good thing on this deck is down around in where the pulleys and spindles are at, there's almost no rust. All the rust is up here pretty much on the surface. I really think I got lucky finding this deck, because these things are getting harder and harder to find. I think what happened in this case is the guy did not have it listed as a GT deck. He just had it listed as a John Deere deck, and I just knew by looking at it what deck it was. I'm gonna go over the rusty spots with rusty metal primer first. You can use a brush and take this thing out and use it one time, and I guarantee you most people will never even be able to tell that you even painted it. All right, so all I'm gonna do is just take this primer, and this is a Rust-Oleum rusty metal primer, and this helps to give the paint a good place to bond. You can put the paint directly on, but this just gives it a little better chance of lasting for an extended period of time. Don't be afraid to put this on a little heavy. It's not going to show up if you get brush strokes and stuff in it as much as people think it will. I kind of feather the edges out too. Alright, what I'm going to use here is the Rust-Oleum. It's JD Yellow for farm implements. It's a really close match for John Deere Yellow. While your paint's still wet too, or at least tacky, you want to pull the tape off, because if you don't, it can peel the paint off with the tape. And for those of you wondering too, I did paint the top guards. I didn't do it on camera, but the guards have been painted. Alright, what I'm going to do now is go ahead and pull these spindles out and go ahead and get these bearings replaced. I could tell by spinning these by hand that the bearings had been shot. I believe this deck's been sitting out in the weather for quite a while, so the bearings are not worth taking a chance on it. In fact, I went ahead and pulled this one spindle apart over here just to make sure I had the correct bearings, and this bearing here, without forcing it, I can't even turn it. What I'm going to do is go ahead and get this spindle back together, and then I'll show you from start to finish how to replace the bearings in this middle spindle. Bearings that are in this deck are not sealed bearings. They're open bearings, and there's a grease seal on the outside of it. I have our sealed bearings. These will work perfectly fine. If you want to keep these as open bearings, you can pull these seals out of these bearings and put them in here and use the grease fitting. My experience, nobody uses these grease fittings anyway. You may be the exception to that, but most people, I can tell you, do not. You can pull that grease seal out of there there and put this in here so that the grease fitting will still work. But anyway, I'm gonna go ahead and get this one back together, and then I'll show you from start to finish how to change this and the tools that are required to do it. Alright guys, start to finish here, I'll show you what you need to change these bearings. First off, take your pulley off, which I've already done. That is really tight. I use a socket that'll fit down around that hub, and you can knock that down through there. There you go, you can take that whole thing out. Make sure you save your spacers. I'm just changing the whole spindles from this other deck, replacing these extremely wore out blades. So I got both my spacers there. The spacers are the same. It doesn't matter whether they're top or bottom. Next, I'll take a punch, and I'll just come up through here and get underneath this bearing and knock that out through the top. You can kind of just catch the edge of the inside race of that bearing. And you do have to beat on these a little bit, but get all this off of here so I don't tear my paint up too bad. Just keep in mind, this could go flying. You can take a rag and lay it over the top of it just to keep parts from flying up in the air. I'm going to try to leave it uncovered here so you guys can see everything. And I am going back and forth. Don't keep hitting on the same side. You know, hit here, 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 and just kind of go around in a circle. That way you don't cock this thing sideways. You get this cocked sideways in here, it gets extremely hard to get it out. And you really don't have to hit it hard. You just want to hit it consistently. Alright, there comes your seal. That's your seal. And we still gotta get the bearing out. At least this bearing's turning. The other one I knocked out on that one wasn't turning at all. Alright, once you get that out of there, then you've got your spacer in here. Pull your spacer out. Then you can go through the top, and you're going to do the same thing here. You're going to knock your bottom bearing out. And guys, I will say one thing here. I don't recommend taking the bolts out of these spindles unless you have to. A lot of times these will twist off in the spindles. They'll break off. Unless you have a reason to replace this spindle, don't take the spindle out of the deck. A lot of guys are going to say you take this out and put it in a vise, and I agree with that. You can. But unless you need to replace this spindle, I'd say leave it in the deck. Once you get that out of there, clean it up a little bit and you're ready to put it right back together. I get as much of that old grease out of there as I can. Like I said, I do not have any new seals, but since I'm putting sealed bearings in it anyway, these are really just caps anyway. Alright, and then you got your spacer and your seal from the bottom too. I didn't show you guys this on the bottom, but it's identical on the bottom to what you see here on the top. These seals, they're interchangeable. The bearings are interchangeable top to bottom, and so are those spacers. Those are the same thickness for top and bottom, so it doesn't matter which one you put on which. Alright, so after you get all that kind of cleaned up and wiped down, take your new bearings, and again, if you want to put bearings with no seal in them, doesn't matter, they work the same. But put your bearing in the bottom first, and then we're going to put the seal. And I'll show you on the top how to do that. Alright, one other thing I did off camera here that I'd recommend you do, put your grease gun on here and blow these holes out so that you know these holes are clear or have fresh grease in them. These are the spacers off the other deck. You'll see I still got two here, but I'm going to throw one of them on the floor. You've already got your seal in the bottom. Slide that up through there. You can put this in after you get this all together too, but it's easier to just keep everything lined up. Alright, just get that knocked all the way down in there. You can put your seal back in there. Cup side goes down, flat side goes up. Make sure that's level. Gotta tap that shaft up in there a little bit. Make sure when you do that you don't push that bearing back out the top though. Alright, then put your spacer on there with the grooves down. Put your pulley back on. We'll hit that with an impact and tighten that down. Hold the blade underneath or block it up with a piece of wood. All right, the best way I've found to put this deck belt on is leave this latched. That gives you as much slack as you can on this deck belt. Pull this around this big pulley, the bottom of the big pulley in the back. Around the back of this bracket here. Goes underneath this pulley. This is why you got to leave this big spring off. Come around this. Down to your far pulley on the far, be the left side of the deck. Around this one. This can be a little tight right here. There's a slot in this pulley here. You can move it back and forth. If it's tight, you might need to loosen it up. And then come all the way down and around this pulley here. And then pull this one tight. Once you get that, hook your spring around here. And then you can just pull this and put it on there like that. I got a little bit of grease on it. If you get grease on it, make sure you wipe that off before you try to roll it around. I didn't show it on camera, but I did go around and hit all these grease fittings and fill these spindles full of grease. Even if you've got sealed bearings in there, it still helps to keep the moisture out of there. And then this belt just lays up here for when you put it back on the mower. But that pretty much completes rebuilding this deck. I've got to put the guards back on. I do have a new plastic chute, and I got to put the anti-scalping wheels back in it. Alright, now that I've got that mower deck completed, I'll go ahead and do a walk around here and show you what I know still needs to be done on the mower itself. Obviously this needs to be painted, and I'm going to pull this completely off of here, sand it down, and I'll spray this. I'll do a much better job on this part of it than I did on the deck. Missing the taillights. You can see where somebody's put some kind of rubbery substance on there. We'll have to get that off. I do have the rear taillights and trim pieces for this. The seat switch, I don't even see, maybe there's the wire for it down there, but somebody's got that bypassed. This is the original headlight wire. One of the headlight sockets is missing. Bolt's missing here for the seat. It's only got one in one side. When you're riding this, seat shifts on you like crazy. But we'll get all that off there. The transmission works extremely well. The headlights, plastic covers are missing. There's a crack in this piece here. And guys, if you haven't seen the video I did on the John Deere hood repair, that's a really good video to show you how to fix this plastic. I'll do the same thing on this. I obviously won't go into as much detail in this video, but if you want to see how to do that, check out my video on cracked John Deere hood repair. The steering linkage on this thing, I don't remember which way it is, but it turns much farther one way than it does the other. Well, I'll pull these floor pans off here, clean up all that rust, and then we'll spray this, and I'll show you how to mix up the paint and spray this too. That's really about all I can think of. Motor-wise, this thing has a good motor in it. I mean, the motor runs strong, transmission runs strong. There are no cracks in this hood, which this, as far as I can tell, is an original 1992 GT262 hood for this mower. I don't think it's a replacement. Seat's decent. It's got a few scuffs in it, but there's really nothing to do on the seat. I do have a good video on seat repair too, a cheap repair. Not perfect, but it's a good way to repair a seat if you've just got one, don't want to spend the money on a new one. But anyway, I'm gonna start getting this thing tore apart here, and then I'll show you what I've got here. All you got's ever been off there. Yeah, we'll get that all cleaned up here and see what we got. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and show you how to change the drive belt on this mower. This belt is usable, but it's one of the worst things that can happen when you sell something to somebody and then they bring it back because a belt breaks. It does have a little bit of dry rot in it. One of the most important things with this process is to make sure that your clutch pedal is down. This pedal here, I'm just going to take a tie wrap and tie this down. But all I do is just take that pedal, tie that down, so there's no way that can come back up while you're working on it. And that keeps this belt loose. All right, once that's loose, you can just pull that off of here. Pull this up out of that. You can take this off in the back here. It'll come off and come right over the top of that pulley. You don't need, luckily this is not a hydrostatic or anything with a fan on it. If you're changing a belt on one of these that's got a hydrostatic or a newer one that's got a fan on the top of it, you just gotta be careful with that. Now this one here, we'll have to take this bolt or nut loose here to get this guard out of the way. Something else I already did here is I already unplugged the clutch. So make sure you unplug this because the belt has to come down through that to get it off. And then push some slack up in there. Come down around the bottom. And it is a little tight on the other side. I'll go around the other side here and show you what I got on the other side now. All right, now this is a little bit tight. This is on the other side, but it will come through behind that clutch. And you can get that off of there. Now this one here, we gotta take this nut off of that one to get this guard out of the way. So there's really only 2 bolts you have to take out of this. This one and that one there. And both of these are a 15mm socket or wrench. I think a socket works better to get in here. Obviously you have to take the deck off if you didn't already realize that. But all right, just loosen that up. You do not have to take this nut all the way off. You just need to get enough room between it and that guard so that that belt will pop out between it. All right, and same thing on this front one. Again, these are both 15mm. I think a socket works easier. All right, but just loosen that up. Again, you don't have to take that all the way out. You just gotta get enough room to get the belt up above that. But once you get that, then you can pull this belt right out of here. All right, and there is one more bolt here I forgot about. You have to take your steering linkage loose because this belt will not fit around. It won't come around your steering linkage without taking that loose. So you got to take this end link loose on your steering here to get this belt off. 5 minutes to get it off, 5 minutes to get it back on. I mean, it's not a big job, especially if you've already got the deck off. If you didn't have the deck off, it'd be a little bit more of a chore, but compared to some mowers, this one's really not that hard. All right, and to get this linkage off, you just need a wrench on the bottom, it's a 19mm on the top. All right, and then once you get that nut off of there, just drop that end link down, and then you can pull your belt right out of there. And that gets your belt free so you can replace it. All right, when you put the new belt back on, fish it up over your linkage rod there that we took off. I like to put it up over this bar first so you don't knock it off your other pulleys. Then come down here, put it back up around the clutch. Make sure this wire, yellow wire for the going to the clutch is on the inside. That around that pulley, down inside this guard here. Tighten this back down so it doesn't come off of there while you're trying to get it on all the other ones. You can go ahead and get this back up in here for your steering linkage. All right, I've already got it over the top of this bar here. Make sure it's over that. So looking at this from the right side, come up over this little guard here. Drop that down in there. Come all the way back around the back pulley. All right, and around this one. This one here, you gotta make sure you get it behind the guard. All right, then tighten that back up. All right, then don't forget to plug your clutch or your PTO wire back in. And then I always take a tie wrap, just strap this up through the frame here. There's a hole right here. There used to be a clip in that, but the clip is missing, so I'll just go up through that hole. Try to keep it up on top of that frame rail. That way you know for sure it's not gonna hit anything. That should do it. Belt goes around the drive pulley on the bottom of the motor. Got an idler pulley there. I did tighten that nut up. Comes all the way down the back side over that. Around your linkage there for your steering. I got the steering tightened back up, the end link, all the way down around the back pulley on the rear end. Underneath that idler pulley and then your tensioner pulley here. Tighten that nut back up and then it goes back up to your drive pulley. And that's pretty much all there is to changing that belt. It's really not that big a deal. If I didn't say it earlier, this is a 1/2 inch by 85 inch belt. All right, I didn't show all this on camera, really trying to keep this video as short as possible, but I did want to show you a walk around here on the frame. Got it painted up real nice. The axle's stripped down and cleaned up. Probably should have used flat paint on that, but I like the gloss. There's your serial number on this thing. It is a 1992. If you look that serial number up, GT262. But I did spray this, I did not brush it. But I think it turned out pretty darn good for what it is. It's gonna be a nice mower when it's done. All right, guys, I know I jumped around a little bit from the pressure washing getting this done, but I wanted to get that belt done while I had the mower up on the lift. So now that I got that out of the way, we'll go ahead and start stripping the fenders down here. Get them all cleaned up and painted. Once I get that all stripped down, I'll just wipe it down, get all the dirt and grime off of it as best I can. This will just be the same process I used on the deck where we went over and hit the rusty spots with the primer. Alright, once that primer dries, I'll just take like a Brillo pad or a Scotch-Brite pad and just sand this whole thing down. The bottom of this, I am just going to paint this with a brush, wipe it down, and then I'm going to start painting it. As for this, I just use Rust-Oleum, John Deere green, and like I said, I'm just going to brush it on. And these brushes I use are actually just little chip brushes. I just use them and throw them away on stuff like decks and the undersides of these. I think you can get a dozen or 2 dozen of these for, I don't know, 10 bucks or something. Alright, once you're done with the bottom, flip it over, we'll get started on the top. In the spirit of trying to keep this video a little bit shorter, I'm going to go ahead and just take this thing, get the wire brushing and all that done off camera. This is the step that I know is going to generate the most comments down below because everybody has a different opinion on how you should use this and how you should spray it. With Rust-Oleum paint, I mix it 50-50 with acetone. The biggest comment you're going to get is even the can tells you not to mix this stuff more than 15%. I've sprayed cars, I've sprayed golf carts, I've sprayed motorcycles, I've sprayed plenty of lawnmowers. A 50-50 mix gives you a really consistent mixture to spray out of most paint guns. 50-50 mix with acetone and the paint that you're going to use, whatever color it is, whatever mower you're painting, in this case obviously John Deere green, works perfectly fine. This is going to have plenty of gloss mixed at 50-50. It will take a few coats to get it covered, but it also keeps you from getting runs in your paint. So anyway, you can judge for yourself by the final product whether this is something you want to try or not, but I can tell you it does work and it's going to look good. Alright, what I'm going to do here is pour about 12 ounces of paint in here, and I'll pour that up to 24 ounces with acetone. Way more than I need for this, but that way it gives me enough to get a couple coats on it. Alright, so 12 ounces of paint and 12 ounces of acetone, so we're going to pour it up to the 24 ounce mark. And that is a 50-50 mix. Alright, mix that up really well. Alright, I run about 20 to 22 psi. Alright, second coat. Alright, I'm sure I'll end up editing a lot of this out, but I did end up putting 4 coats of paint on this. I think it turned out pretty darn good. But the good thing about spraying with 50-50 mix, you don't end up with any runs. You can pretty much spray the heck out of it. I'll get this tape pulled off of this. I'm going to get this thing back on here and get it back together. Like I said on the deck too, you want to do this when your paint's still a little bit tacky, just so it doesn't peel the paint off with the tape. All right, next thing I want to show you here, something probably blow your mind here if you've never seen this done before, but on your plastic fender fairs, take a Scotch-Brite pad and rough these up a little bit. I think this is like 400 or 500 grit. I don't have the box anymore for it, but it's pretty fine. Doesn't take much. Then take a propane torch. Take that torch then and just kind of lightly go over this. You don't want to lay in one spot too long. But just take that and just gently go across that surface. If you see smoke, you're holding it on there too long like I just did. But that will amaze you at how much better that will make these fender flares look. Try to get that turned so it hits the light there a little bit. But it basically takes that surface corrosion off of there, makes these things look like almost brand new again. That's an easy, simple trick. Doesn't cost hardly anything to make these things look new again. I don't think you're going to get a 30-year-old fender flare to look any better than that. All right, next thing I've got here is this bumper off the front here that's got the crack in it. I'll show you real quickly how to fix this. But guys, I've got an entire video that shows you how to fix these cracks in the hoods. It's the same process here. The only difference is this has this rubber padding on the back that has to be taken out before you can do it. But I'll do this real quick, and I'll put a link somewhere right about here so you can connect to the video I had where I showed you how to fix the entire hood and fix these cracks the correct way. You can use about anything. Just scrape this foam out of there. It's just a door panel tool for removing door panels off of cars, but just get that foam out of there so you can get to that crack on both sides. All right, but then the main tool here, it is this heat gun, and I go into a lot more detail in this in the other video, but it uses these little staples, and we'll probably only put maybe 6 or 7 of them, but they fit in this gun like this. But those little wire pieces just embed down into this plastic, and I'll show you how to do this. First thing you want to do with this is get this crack closed up as best as you can. Just cheap masking tape, any kind of tape really. Pull that crack together tight. This way you're not trying to hold it on the other side while you're doing it. But anyway, once you get that taped off, take your little wire piece. Do not pull the trigger until you touch the plastic on here. And be mindful of how thick this plastic is too. If you get this too hot, it'll go right through that plastic. But set that down on the plastic. I have not pulled the trigger yet. Once you get it lined up exactly where you want it, pull the trigger. Don't put much pressure on it, because once it starts heating up, it'll drop right down in there. Pull that trigger. You'll see it start to drop down in there. And then I just twist it just a little bit to help tighten that crack up. But again, I'll set this down on the plastic, pull the trigger. Once it gets there, turn it just not very much, just enough to tighten it up. You can buy this tool off of Amazon. I'll put a link down in the description below the video. That's what you end up with, and then we'll cut off those little tails so they don't poke into something. You can see on that side. Now I'll go back and I'll polish this piece up too. In fact, we'll polish the entire hood up. But you will still see that. You know, the last video I had people comment, oh, I can still see the crack. Yeah, you can still see the crack. I could eliminate the crack, but this is a lawnmower. It's not a show car. I'm not big on unboxings, but original GT reflector taillights. I did manage to get all the black streaks and scuffs off of this seat. That had those black streaks on the edge of it right there. That's what I used. It's actually for campers and stuff like that, but it works really good on these seats. That gives you an idea of what that seat looks like. It's got a few little minor imperfections that I can't get off of it. But anyway, that thing turned out really nice. All right, I did take a seat bolt out of another mower that I had. Much better. That pretty much does it for the rear end of this thing. I'm going to drop it down, get it flipped around, and we'll get started on the hood and the front end of it. Mentioned earlier in this video that the thing didn't turn very far to the right. What I have found here is the front hanger. somebody has got this bracket on the back. Surprised I didn't see this sooner, but if you try to turn the wheel to the right, it hits that and won't let this thing turn to the right. I can't believe I used this thing as much as I did without realizing that. I just didn't get down here and look at it, but all right, but anyway, this bracket should go on here like this. Goes in that side, and this rotates back. Now this piece is bent down. I'll have to bend that back and then I'll weld that back together, but that when that's straightened out, it fits in there. But if that's on there correctly, that wheel turns all the way as far as it's supposed to. It's hitting my lift there, but it would turn all the way. But that's the only thing I can find wrong with this steering linkage, so I'll get this off here, get that ground down, get that welded back together. All right, got this all set up here. Just try to bend this back as much as I can by hand. Probably break both sides off of it here before I'm done. Alright, I'm not going to take my camera with me, but let me take this over here and hit it with a wire wheel real quick. I'm still trying to figure this welder out, but I'm going to set it on about 250 and about 18 volts. I'm guessing this to be about 1/8 inch thick steel. Probably do a review on this thing at some point too. It's just a little Harbor Freight welder, but I'll tell you what, I'm pretty impressed with it so far. I'll say that before I weld. Put an extra bead down this other side too there just to give it a little strength. Should be good enough to hold it. I mean, this isn't anything structural. All it's doing is keeping that from rotating, so. All right, I know it's far from perfect, but that's literally the second time I've used that welder and started out real hot. Once I turned it down a little bit, I was able to get it back together, but for what its intended purpose is, that'll hold just fine. This piece here, I said I was just gonna polish it up, but it had way too much going on with it. I did end up priming it and painting it just so I could hide a lot of the imperfections that were on it. Like I said, you'll still see that crack there. If you wanted to take the time and fill that in, you could. One side of this hood has a good hinge. The hinge is still good on this side, but this one here, the internal pieces there broke off. I do still have the piece there, but I'm gonna have to drill a hole through this, and I'm just gonna put a bolt all the way through it and then double nut it on the inside. Really don't have much choice, you know. I mean, I hate the way they design these. I just can't imagine an engineer sitting at John Deere saying, let's put a plastic bumper and the hinge in the front of a tractor that you know is going to run into stuff and crack. But anyway, it is what it is. I'll paint the head of the bolt green so it shows as little as possible, but I just don't see any good way to fix this and actually have a hinge that works here. I probably should have said this when I took this hood off. You should pull the bolts out of the bumper and take it off as one single piece. So I went ahead and took that bumper cover off, and then I'll just drill straight through the original hole where it was mounted. All right, and then I will take the original piece and put it back in there on both sides. And the best way to slide this up in here is to start down in the hood and come up through underneath. And just pry it open just enough to get that in there. All right, and then on this side, I'll still use the original piece and the original screw. And guys, I recommend leaving this a little loose. You surely don't want to tighten this down so much that it cracks. Just kind of snug that down. It's a little bit loose, I'd leave it that way. And that way you can mount this thing as one single unit with the hood. And then I just dip the whole head of that bolt down in the green paint. The inside really doesn't matter. You could dip the entire bolt or spray the entire bolt, but anyway, the outside's the only thing that's going to show when the hood's closed. I recommend waiting until it dries, but I just want to get it in here and get this done. But then just put your nut on the inside here. I'm going to go ahead and snug that down there. And then take a second nut and lock it on there. You might need to find a really thin wrench. I've got one here that I ground down for something else. It's a 7/16. Hold the inside nut and tighten the outside nut. And that way you've got a good working hinge there. Something else that I'll do here is just take some multi-purpose grease, any kind of grease will work, and put it on this hinge catch here on the sides. You can see where I put the grease down in there. Anything on there to kind of help these hoods open and close easier to keep them from breaking. All right, when you put this hood back on here, it's good if you have somebody to help you, but fold your hinge down so the hood will be in the up position if it was on the mower. And then just put this on here, line that up on both sides, and I do have the bolts in the top part. You can let your hood down for now. And then just get this slid back on there, and then you can fold it back up. Not the easiest thing to do with one person, but it can be done. And what I'll do is line that up right there. I'll show you this right here. It slides in the end of that frame rail. I already had those bolts in there, so you can just slide it on there, and that kind of helps hold it. Before you tighten these down, close your hood. This is slotted, so make sure your hood matches up on the top. So in other words, when you close it down, make sure it matches right here. If not, you can slide those bolts forward or backwards down there on the bottom before you tighten them up. That looks pretty good right there. And guys, if you watch my video on the John Deere hood repair, these hood latches, I take these off and flip them around backwards so that they do not catch on the hood. If you would do this, it saves a lot of problems with these hoods cracking. This way it does not catch the hood. A lot of times these hoods break because somebody grabs them in the center and jerks them open. And I do put these back in here backward, just so if somebody down the road wants to flip these back around the way they belong, they can. And then that way you close this hood, the weight of that hood will hold it down. Now if you're on really rough terrain or you're going to put this on a trailer or a truck or something, I would recommend strapping that hood down or flipping those back around so it catches. That can save you from cracking this hood just trying to get it open, especially when they get this old. They're very brittle. Alright, I also got the wiring harness and the headlights back in this thing, and I got brand new headlight covers here for this. And they are different. The one on the left side is M11097, M11096 for the right side. Like brand new. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and polish this thing up. I do use a very aggressive wool pad. If you're kind of new to polishing, I'd recommend you use a foam pad with a light cut polish. Now, if you've got a hood that has a lot of oxidation, this one does not, I'd recommend you go ahead and wet sand that with like a 600 grit or an 800 grit sandpaper. I'm just going to get this done, and I'm going to do a walk around here, and I'll show you everything that I've done to this thing. Alright, I think that's about as good as this old girl's gonna get. I got a nice paint job. Came with a decent seat. Motor's nice and cleaned up. I did get the oil changed. New air filter. I didn't show a lot of this on video just to save time. But these old Kawasaki motors are good motors. She's got new tires on her. I'm sure you've noticed that the tires seem extra shiny, and what that is here, I use a product called Coverall. Works good on the dash. Pretty much any plastic pieces on this mower. Used it on the back tires. Hinge fix there, works really well. Got working headlights now. New taillights. All the grease fittings, another new tire on there. I think we took a $250 tractor with a $100 deck, about 3 days worth of work, and turned it into something we could be proud of. It's a 1992 John Deere GT262. It's basically the same mower as a John Deere GT275, except the only difference is this one is a gear drive transmission, where the GT275 is a hydrostatic. It's got two pedals down here to control your speed. This is one of the few mowers that John Deere actually made with a true gear drive transmission in it. A lot of them had a vari drive transmission. I think that's about as good as this old girl's gonna get. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. I really appreciate it. Consider hitting that like button. Give me some comments down below, too. If you've got some projects you're working on, I'd be more than happy to hear and even see the projects you're working on. If you've got videos, I don't mind if you share a link down below. I'd love to see them. But anyway, guys, thanks again. Till next time.